Part 7. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 61. Sugu showed off his skills at dinner that night. The interview went smoothly in the morning and made people a little excited. It seemed that he would be able to pass the exam as an admiral here even without relying on his original identity. At this moment, he was standing in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, holding a knife in one hand and holding a green pepper in the other. When I was working in other places, I developed my cooking skills at that time, and I could always make some home-cooked dishes. Lexington stood beside him, and Sugu explained, "My method is to flatten the green pepper first, then break the green pepper and remove the pepper seeds inside, then cut the green pepper into strips, and finally chop it." As he said this, he chopped the green pepper into fine pieces on the cutting board, then cracked the prepared eggs into the bowl and stirred them with chopsticks. Fry the eggs, then scoop them out and put them into a bowl. First put oil in the wok, turn on the heat, put chopped garlic in the hot oil, then add dried chili peppers, stir fry until fragrant, then add the original chopped green chili peppers. Soon after, a dish was ready, and he took out an eggplant and cut it into strips. "I'm also good at minced eggplant meat, and then I'll fry you some fish-flavored shredded pork." The cooking process went smoothly. Sugu was very satisfied with his craftsmanship, but some people were not satisfied. Sugu could only complain, "Gia, stop hanging around here." "What? You actually asked me why there is no fish in the fish-flavored shredded pork." "Of course there is no fish in the fish-flavored shredded pork, and there is no wife in the wife cake. Couples lungs, there are no couples in the film. You said it's too spicy? The weather is getting colder and colder now. Spicy is better. If it's not spicy, where will the flavor come from?" "What, Xiaozai, you think it's spicy too, so I won't put chili pepper in the next dish." Soon, Sugu brought the dishes he cooked to the table. "Let you have a taste of my craftsmanship." As he said this, Sugu smiled under Saratoga's angry eyes, Lexington's encouraging eyes, and little Turpit's admiring eyes. Afterwards, Lexington took a bite of the food and said with a smile, "Admiral, it's very good." Sugu waved his hands and said modestly, "It's okay, okay." Lexington held his chopsticks and asked casually, "You are actually in such a good mood. It seems that the interview went well." "It's not so bad, except for one guy who keeps asking weird questions." "Weird question?" "Yes, for example, asking me what kind of women I like, what kind of hair I like, and what I like to eat. Except for that person, the questions asked by the examiner are pretty serious, although they are not very serious." Lexington's heart thumped involuntarily. She remembered her encounter with Akagya. She kept her promise and did not tell her admiral the news about Akagya. At this time, she thought it was Akagi who asked the question. She was quite cunning. Well. But it didn't matter, no matter how much the defeated dog struggled. Lexington didn't care too much. She asked, "Did she ask any questions?" "Just some questions about your hobbies and interests. Most of them are like this, but she asked me to write love poems and sing love songs, and she also asked me to write a proposal for marriage, which was inexplicable." Lexington was stunned. Love song? Love poem? Confession of marriage proposal? He even got the ring without even hearing about it, but Akage was the first to listen to the admiral's proposal. She was surprised that Akage would do such a thing. She couldn't tell that he who usually behaved so dignified could be so careless behind his back. Click. The chopsticks in Lexington's hand were broken directly in the middle by his own fingers. Consultant Su asked, "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing, nothing." Lexington asked hurriedly, "Then what? Did you really do it?" Sugu said nonchalantly, "I did it." The porcelain bowl was then opened in Lexington's hands, and she inadvertently used the power from the ship girl. Lexington spoke for the first time and cursed softly, "Idiot." Sugu said, if there's anything stupid to do, just do it, it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? I got the ring but I didn't hear the proposal, but that guy from Akage did. Then reveal the news about Akage immediately. No, no, it doesn't make much sense to say it at this point. I just want to see what other tricks Akage can come up with. There will always be a time when she will play with fire and burn herself. But waiting for Akage to play with fire and burn himself is one thing, but the so-called marriage proposal confession is another thing. Lexington said, then you make one for me. How can I do it all at once? It's okay to treat it as a political task to strangers, but it feels completely different to tell it to familiar people. If strangers say it, they say it, and familiar people will do it again in the future. Be remembered. But even if Sugu refused, Lexington, who usually absolutely agreed with his decision, refused at this time. She said aggrievedly, didn't you do it during the interview? During the interview, I had no choice but to force myself to say it. I'm really embarrassed to say it now. Lexington showed an aggrieved expression and said, you have told a bunch of strangers, but you dare not say it to your own wife? You should know how much harm your husband can do to his wife by talking about love to other women. And I don't mind if you took action against Jiajia when you were in Gishan. Sugu couldn't stand Lexington's eyes, and he owed a favor, so he finally surrendered and said, okay, I'll tell you what I said during the interview. I want to listen to what you say during the interview, and you have to make a new one, just for me. If you ask me to make another one all at once, I really can't do it. Can't do it? I cried to show you. It was very difficult, okay. With this attitude, he still drafted the confession he knew in his mind, and then made some slight modifications. I just did it casually, and you feel almost better. In fact, I am very conflicted. I can't continue like this, I can't suppress my feelings anymore, you must allow me to tell you how much I love you. Our two identities are a little different, but I can't think so rationally. I can't help it. From the moment we first met, I have developed a passionate love and affection for you. Despite constant struggles, my reason is still defeated. I must fervently beg you to relieve my pain and agree to marry me. He paused and felt that his thoughts kept coming to him, and he continued, I said I will love you for the rest of my life, even a year, a month, a day, and an hour are not enough. After hearing her admiral's words, Lexington's pretty face turned red unconsciously. Her admiral's words of love were so wonderful. She wondered why she couldn't remember anything when she agreed to propose. She should have told the admiral at that time. A romantic confession, at least 1,000 words, no, give him some time, a confession of 10,000 words. Okay, I feel a little happier. After Sugu finished speaking, he was about to continue eating. To Sugu's surprise, Lexington didn't play her cards according to the routine at all. She reached out and held Sugu's palm on the table and said, since you said so, yes, I agree to your proposal. No, we are already married. Although Lexington always said she was his wife, there was almost no skin-to-skin contact between them. The really gentle Lexington made it difficult for Sugu to make a move, and he felt that he would be a gangster if he made a move. Then he found a topic and took out his hand. It was rare to see Lexington not looking at him with resentful eyes. However, at this time, Saratoga moved a bench and sat next to him, and the girl's voice sounded like a silver bell, brother-in-law, I want it too. Sugu looked at Saratoga, who was joining in the fun. He was already embarrassed when he told Lexington, and now he wanted to say it himself? No way, he clapped his hands and said angrily, it can't be done, and Xiaozai is watching. Little Turpitz was eating, she just didn't know much about men and women. Then Sugu helped Little Turpitz put vegetables in the bowl and said, come, Xiaozai, let's try your admiral's cooking. The angry Saratoga returned to his seat, thinking angrily, you will regret it if you do this to me. After eating soon after, it was getting dark and I went into my room to get ready for bed. In the darkness, Lexington said, "Gaga. What's wrong?" "Sister. A pioneer in aviation tactics, Akage will no longer be a part of him." Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 62. The interview has passed and I am waiting for the notification, and then there are quiet days. This is 2 nights after the interview. Sugu sat in front of the desk, holding a pen in one hand. He paused and dropped the tip of the pen on the paper. "Dear San Juan." He wrote such a line on the letterhead paper. He vaguely remembered that the format of writing letters was like this when he was a child, starting with "Dear so-and-so" or "Dear so-and-so." Just after writing these few words, he felt something was wrong, so he crossed out this line of words with a pen and started over on the next line. After thinking about it, he crumpled up the entire paper and threw it into the trash can. Then he spread out a piece of letterhead paper on the desk and wrote slowly. "San Juan. I have been separated from you for a long time, and I should have written to you a long time ago, but now I have barely settled down. After parting ways with you, we found the Lexington and Saratoga sisters in Guizhou. Now everyone is in Sichuangziu, which is an island city not far from the company where you live. You should know that. I originally wanted to go find you, but since you are doing the job of escorting me, I need to follow the ship a lot, so I finally decided not to go. Rebuilding the town hall is very difficult. The original town hall decided not to be used because it requires a lot of money to renovate. Now I don't have the money. I remembered that when I was working in a nearby county, many people said that the town hall was like an illusion. It had never communicated with the outside world before. It was only after it was abandoned that everyone knew there was a town hall there. In this case, I thought I might as well continue to abandon it. Went down. I obtained a new admiral status in Chuangziu and registered my name at the headquarters. As long as I study for a period of time, I will soon be able to have my own garrison. This naval academy is very chaotic, from the written examination to the interview. Regarding the study of an admiral, the longest I have seen is 2 years. However, with the opening of new routes or the revival of deep-sea ship girls, new garrison forts have been established in many places, so there are also newcomers who have studied for a short period of time and have garrison forts. Humanity cannot live without the ocean, and the need for admirals will only increase in the future. I don't know how long I will study here, but it shouldn't be too long. I don't want to study anymore at all, so I just need some training. If you want to come over, you can come to us, the address is on the letter. Here, I wish you a safe journey." Sugu finished writing the last word on the letterhead, read it over and over again, and said to himself, "The description is very messy, there should be a space here, forget it, I'll forget about it after I've written it all." Then he waved to little Turpitz and said, "Where's the address? Xiaozai, please bring our backpacks." When he met San Juan before, he had written down the address of Lexington and San Juan on paper. A good memory is not as good as a bad pen. This was what his former teacher said repeatedly. Then he said to himself, "Also, fill in the postal code and stamp here." Sugu prepared everything, but before sealing it, he hesitated and said to Lexington, "Do you want to take a look?" "Take a look, do you think it is suitable? Will the tone seem frivolous? There is still an order. It's a bit messy, and if there are only minor issues, I won't change it." Lexington took the letterhead and said shortly after, "That's about right." Then Sugu took the letter again, sealed it, put it into the desk drawer, and said, "I'll send it out tomorrow. I don't know how long it will take to receive it. I promised her to contact her frequently, but I never did. I am indeed not qualified to be an admiral, and she probably thought I was leaving her alone." Soon after, Sugu pulled up the curtains on the window and said, "Xiaozai, have you washed your feet?" Then he climbed into bed. Forget it, you don't sleep with me now anyway, whatever you want to do. After a pause, Sugu took a breath and looked at little Tirpitz jumping on the bed, and said helplessly, "You really believe it? Get out of bed and wash your feet quickly." Sugu slept alone in his room at night, with his hands on his pillow. Although the lights had been turned off for a long time, he still didn't sleep. Suddenly there was a creaking sound, and he stretched out his hand to turn on the bedside lamp. Saratoga stood in the doorway of his room holding a pillow and wearing pajamas. "Brother-in-law, are you still awake? I remember I closed the door, how could you open it?" "It's just a door. It opens with a slight push." She could twist off the steel at will, but it was just a small door lock. Sugu sighed and said, "Why are you running here?" "Well, that." Not long after, Sugu was lying on the bed alone again. Of course the girl who came to his door was infinitely nice, but he really didn't know what would happen if he really took action. The life of being an admiral has its hardships and its beauty, but most of the time it is beautiful. At this time, on the other side of Chuangziu, a person hurriedly ran past on a quiet street. She walked through a small alley, and a dog barked suddenly in front of her. She didn't pay attention, jumped over a sewer and walked into a corridor. And then the sound of thumping was heard. She climbed up to the second floor on the welded iron stairs and opened the door. "You are not with the admiral. Sister, you work the night shift today, and we want to sleep with you." "It doesn't matter if you don't sleep with me," Fletcher, who is called Sister, thought as he unbuttoned his clothes little by little. Sigsby said, "Sister, you're taking off your clothes again." Fletcher hung his clothes on the wall, and then simply put on an autumn coat. At this time, she was sitting on the bed, wearing only one piece of clothing, and her seductive long legs were curled together. "It's very uncomfortable to wear so many clothes." Fletcher said this, and then she saw Thatcher put her hands on the clean sheets on the bed, and she immediately said, "Thatcher, don't wipe your hands with the sheets." "You, Thatcher, Sullivan, Sigsby, hurry up and give me a bath." Sigsby quickly raised his hand and said, "I've already washed it myself." Soon after, Sullivan walked out of the bathroom after taking a shower. Her pink hair was not tied up but simply draped behind her back. At this time, Fletcher, as her sister, wiped her hair with a towel. Sullivan raised his head and asked, "Sister, the Admiral has been admitted to the Academy. When can we live with the Admiral?" "If you want to find the Admiral, you can always find him. If you want to live together, you can always live there." "Then sister, when the Admiral has a garrison, will he not want us anymore, just like before?" Fletcher's hand holding the towel paused. She thought of the current Admiral and the past Admiral, and said slowly, "No." "Oh, then I hope the Admiral will build the garrison soon." Soon after, the lights in the room went out, and the three little girls slept side by side. Fletcher himself slept on the outside. Their beds were still very large. Time passed like this little by little, and preparations for admission began. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 63. For registration before admission, Sugu took little Tirpitz alone. After all, it was just a simple registration. It would have been too conspicuous to bring Lexington and Saratoga, even if others didn't know she was a ship girl. Such beautiful women are eye-catching. The registration process was not simple. In the empty room, Sugu was signing contracts one after another. These contracts stipulate the resources and education that the college needs to pay, and also clearly describe the responsibilities and rights that newcomers should have after becoming admirals. For example, it is the monthly resource ration after owning the tutelage, or how long it takes as an admiral to suppress the deep-sea ship girl after receiving the news, and thirdly, the regulations and breach of contract that need to be observed as an admiral. Price. Each contract clearly stated the division of responsibilities and powers between the college and the students. Sugu held the pen and carefully read the regulations in the mimeographed contract. Soon after, he signed all the contracts, and then the bright-eyed girl who signed up for him put all the contracts into a document bag, and then said, "These contracts will be given to you after we stamp them. Then you just keep yours. Next, you have to take a photo, and then we will put your photo and your information into the file." Then Sugu was taken to a room, and another person came to take pictures of him. The woman who took the photo was wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses and looked ordinary. She must be just an ordinary person. As he thought, the woman who took the photo said coldly, "Don't laugh, be more serious and open your eyes wider." When Sugu heard the voice, he immediately tried to open his eyes wide, but the brows on his forehead would wrinkle when his eyes widened. He said, "I'm not smiling, but my eyes can only be opened so wide." "Then sit up straight for me." Then Sugu came out of the room where the photo was taken, and the ship girl who signed up for him said, "The photos have to wait for the film to be developed. In addition to the file needs, the photos will also be used to make your ID, the ID that proves your identity as an admiral. The seal will be made soon, and it will be ready after school starts. You need to keep your certificate and seal well. If you lose it, you need to replace it and report it to the newspaper." Finally, after finishing a lot of troublesome things, Sugu took little Turpits out of the college building. At this time, they were walking on the avenue inside the college. Just like what they heard that day, there were many people welcoming the new students. At this time, the avenue full of sycamore trees was filled with tables and chairs. Many vendors from Chuangzhou originally gathered here. After all, generally speaking, people who will become admirals in the future have great prospects and are not short of money. In addition, there are people from some countries or companies who want admirals to protect the merchant shipping routes of their own countries or companies, so they need to invest in admirals very early. But after all, they are government officials or employees of large companies. They are always in suits and ties. All kinds of people, community recruitment flags flying high on the roadside, beautifully decorated black carriages and horses, an endless stream of pedestrians, a black car honking its horn in the crowd, and then being knocked on. After knocking on the window and saying a few words, someone came out of the cab and seemed to want to quarrel. Sugu and little Turpits were standing on the roadside watching the fun, but the fun hadn't started yet, and he suddenly found himself entangled. A man with a crew cut and glasses, who most likely looked like an admiral recruiting people for his club, said to him at this time, "Do you want to join the club?" Sugu waved his hand and said, "I have no interest." He had never joined any clubs when he was in school, and he had no interest in the student union or class cotters. He thought it was the most troublesome thing. Most of the time, he just reading a book or playing on the computer alone. At least you need to understand that our club is quite famous in the entire college. Everyone in the club helps each other, is united and friendly." The admiral helped his eyes, and then continued seriously, "Let me tell you this, even if admirals also need to help each other, and you can't just rely on your few ship girls. Facing some powerful deep-sea ship girl formations, it is also possible for several sea area garrison offices to unite. As a new admiral, drills, attacks, many times it takes many people to help each other in order for people to grow. Although our club is called a club, it is actually just a club that allows everyone to get familiar with each other and unite. Among the few clubs in the college, we the community is the biggest." Now that you have said something powerful, Sugu became a little more interested and asked, "What kind of club are you? Would you like some rabbits today? Our club is called this. You see, this is the mascot of our club." The admiral raised the sign in his hand that was used to recruit new recruits. On the sign, he drew a picture with a colored pen. It was a little girl wearing a cute blue skirt with a rabbit on her head. The rabbit was an Angora rabbit. This is the mascot of our club. Her name is Xiangfeng's Hino. Don't have any misunderstandings and think that we are an irregular club. We don't know how many big guys have appeared in our club. Cafes Chino? Sugu quickly took the hand of little Turpitz sitting next to him and said coldly, "Sorry, I don't really want to participate." However, after hearing Sugu's words, the admiral still said, "Really, newcomers like you must join our club." Where Sugu was willing to comply, the admiral showed a sincere expression and said, "Don't look at us with prejudice, they are just animations handed down from the old world. The entertainment industry in the old world used to be infinitely developed, but in the end the whole world it was destroyed in a catastrophe. No one knows whether it was a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. Of course, we leave it to scholars to investigate the reasons for the destruction of the old world. This is just the role of the first president of our society in the history of the old world. Just a cute character I found." Sugu had heard of the name of this society on the ship. It was definitely not good for the other party to work so hard. In the end, he could only say helplessly, "But I don't have a destroyer." He stared at little Turpitz and said, "Isn't your ship girl a destroyer? It's just right to join us. I wish all destroyers could be such cute little girls, destroyers are so beautiful." Sugu touched little Turpitz's head and said, "Well, I'm sorry, she is a battleship and has nothing to do with a destroyer." The admiral stared at little Turpitz for a moment and said, "Isn't she a destroyer? It's impossible. She is a battleship. Zai, show your ship uniform." Crash. Little Turpitz appeared in front of him in a ship uniform. Sugu only saw the admiral take a few deep breaths slowly, and then he grabbed his hand and shook it as if he were meeting a big leader. He panted heavily and said impatiently, "Please, please join our club and join us, the vice president of the company, Battleship Little Lolita, I can't stand it anymore." The unfolding of little Turpitz's ship suit had already attracted a lot of attention from the surroundings, but now it attracted even more attention. Sugu broke away and took little Turpitz's hand to walk into the crowd. However, the admiral stopped him and said, "I'm sorry, you have to join us now." At this time, Sugu suddenly saw a figure walking over, so he pointed behind him and said, "I'm not going to leave, but you probably have to leave. You can't fool me by diverting your attention. I'm not going to lie to you." In his sight, a short-haired girl wearing a white military uniform and black boots patted the man on the shoulder. When the man turned his head, she raised an ID and said, "We are the military police. Please come with us trip. You cute dolphin, you will have a day." Sugu laughed, and then the girl's eyes lit up and she looked at Sugu holding little Turpitz and said, "You also want to come with us?" Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 64. It was very simple to get out of the gendarmerie. After all, Sugu was such a serious person. He just wrote a letter of guarantee. After registering, the formal enrollment will be 2 days later. Sugu, who had spent 2 days calmly, was sitting in the classroom of the college with his face on his hands, surrounded by newcomers like him. Among them were people younger than him, middle-aged soldiers wearing military uniforms who looked serious and indifferent, and girls. In short, there were all kinds of people gathered in this large classroom at this time. Standing on the podium at this time was the ship girl who inherited the soul of the aircraft carrier Zeppelin. She had black stockings, long legs, white hair and red eyes. She was tapping the blackboard on the wall with a pointer in her hand. "I am your instructor, Zeppelin. Of course you can also call me Catherine. I just want to remind you that if you newbies don't obey, I will beat you." At this time, the serious people were sitting upright, while the perverted people had already started banging the table and howling. This was the first class that Sugu came into contact with, and the first thing he mentioned was the admiral's rights and obligations. He had already read the rights and obligations of the admiral when he signed the contract. He was already past the age where others asked him to sign whatever he wanted. Just like in the past, even if he was given a copy of his ID card, he would specifically write only on it. For what use? However, he didn't talk about rights and obligations for too long. Zeppelin began to talk about things that he needed to pay attention to as an admiral. There used to be ship girls who were disgusted by what they had done because they killed innocent people. As she became more and more suspicious of what she had done, she gradually turned into a deep-sea ship girl. Generally speaking, ships most girls are innocent, especially those cute destroyers, so as admirals, the most important thing you need to pay attention to is not to let your ship girls fall into confusion. This is exactly why the ship girls need you. There is no justice between countries, and ship girls do not belong to any country, but to the entire world. Therefore, as admirals, we need to remain neutral in the war. Only deep-sea ship girls are the enemies we need to deal with. What happened next was no different from what Sugu heard from the Admiral Eugene he met before. Soon after, he began to lie on the table and look at the people around him. Then, I don't know how long passed like this, but Zeppelin, who had been talking continuously, stopped. She let out a long sigh and said, "It's hard to deal with your listless appearance. I don't understand why every class of students is like this. Since you want it this way, you want to experience the grandeur of the old history, I promise you to build your own ship girl. Actually, I don't like to use the word build, and I don't want to say belong, because every life is unique, but you humans have too much possessiveness. So let's just use the word belonging." This sentence suddenly made many newcomers who were originally listless become excited. After all, this is the most important thing about becoming an admiral. Sugu immediately noticed that some people almost jumped with excitement, but they were quickly glared at and then quickly calmed down. Go down. There are many ship girls in the school. We don't want to ask anyone to become whose ship girl against their will, so we will build the initial ship ourselves. But let me also say that there are many ship girls in the academy. Who do you want to pick up? You can pursue it, everyone depends on their ability, of course, as long as you don't take action against the ship girl who has an admiral. At the beginning of the new semester, the school gave each future admiral a resource, so he followed a group of people to the warehouse. Zeppelin lifted the dark green raincloth, and the abandoned and rusted steel appeared in front of him. It was part of the ship that had sunk at the bottom of the sea for a long time. The deck, broken masts, and twisted ship doors filled a warehouse. Sugu could tell just by looking at it that it was different from ordinary steel. This feeling could only be felt but could not be explained in words, because he could not explain why at all. There was no way to describe it in terms of shape, color, or degree of rust, because it was just a feeling. Zeppelin randomly picked up a piece of iron sheet and said, "This is the steel used to build the awakening ship girl. It must be steel that has experienced the history of the old world and carried the thoughts and memories of countless people. Not any steel can be used to wake up the warships, you don't just have to sink the warship into the deep sea and then fish it up. A steel factory can produce countless tons of steel in a day. If the steel could be used to wake up the warships, the collection of warships would have been overflowing. The steel that carries history is very difficult, and our college has spent many years of effort collecting just this warehouse. Of course, there is no need to worry about the less and less steel. Because of the existence of the ship girl, as she sinks, she will degenerate into a deep-sea ship girl, or she will turn into the past history and rest it on other steel, so that is in this way, the number of all ship girls will always maintain a certain degree of balance and will not overflow. It is precisely because of this that your senior government officials do not have much ill will towards us, because they cannot make too big a wave. However, be happy, ship girls are so rare, you are extremely lucky to be able to become an admiral. Let me say something here first, A ship girl is an elf born from beautiful memories and qualities. If you are useless, if you are not kind, unjust, unloyal, or not strong, there is nothing worthy of praise. Those who were on the battleship in the past, the thoughts and memories of the working sailors do not recognize you. Even if you have the resources, you will get nothing except watching a movie. This is why we require the person who becomes an admiral to be a good person and a person with his own persistence. Human reasons. Of course, the ship girl can easily see through people's hearts, but if it is your own ship girl, she will certainly not look at you with suspicion, so you don't need to worry about your abnormal psychology being discovered by your own ship girl. The fact that you are able to come here still shows that you have something worthy of recognition. Even if you become a bad person in the future, you will not be too bad. And if you really become a bad person, we will punish you. But before we sanction you, please don't be punished by your own girl. Okay, get ready. I will take you to the warehouse. Give it a try and build your own ship girl. Sugu watched the newcomers enter the warehouse one by one. At this time, Zeppelin's voice sounded in his ears. You go to the innermost seat by the window. Why? Zeppelin thought of Akaga's explanation. She didn't know why Akaga cared so much about the man in front of her, but she obeyed her senior's words. She curled her lips and said, because someone asked you to go, good luck guy. Of course there were plain wreckage piled there, but of course she wasn't prepared to reveal such things. Soon after, Sugu stood in front of the tall warehouse. The smell of staleness came from the air. He stretched out his hand and touched the rusted steel. His fingers followed the wire cables from rivets to the deck. It seemed that these steels had experienced the scene in the past. Appearing again. He only felt that he had just walked several meters inside the warehouse along the arc of old steel with his fingers, but it suddenly felt like he had walked through the long river of time, walking from the other end of the long river of time through the smoky river surface, from the colorful the world comes to the black and white curtain of the movie. In the field of vision, there were dark clouds and rough seas. Looking for the lost ship girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 65. The flames of war were raging, cannons were roaring, countless people were cheering, and a huge warship was launched from the dock and pushed away the waves. Each scene flashed quickly in front of Sugu, and then slowly stopped. Sugu first saw the huge battleship, and then the scene quickly switched to the tall bridge. Before he had time to think about what kind of battleship it was, the scene in front of him was like glass shattering and starting to become fragmented again. Soon after, the picture gradually came together again, and Sugu saw two crew members standing on the deck of the battleship. One of the crew members stood on the deck and looked up at the tall bridge on the deck and said, "My ship is my girl, and my girl must have short hair." Hearing the slightly yearning words of his companion, another crew member said, "It must be short blonde hair. My daughter is golden. Short blonde hair is great, and my ship must be too. And she must be a handsome girl. Meet no matter how much suffering you have, you will never give in. The breasts must be big. My daughter has big breasts. But when I went home last time, I heard that she had a boyfriend. If I knew who that guy was, I would kill him with my double-barreled shotgun. Got him. My daughter will not have a boyfriend. She will always be with her father. The same is true for my ship. She will always be with me until the war is won." Then they both laughed, as if laughing at themselves for suddenly imagining the huge ship as a cute girl. One of the crew members tapped the metal cabin with his finger and said, "If this big guy is a girl, she must be a loyal and brave girl, and she will only love me. You pervert, if you love me too." Then their voices gradually became louder and quieter, and the picture in front of Sugu became increasingly blurry. Not long after, he heard another rapid blast of horns. The picture in front of him gradually became clearer from darkness, and the vague sounds in his ears gradually became clearer. Then he heard someone shouting, "Get ready, get ready, we're going to Midway next, everyone do their own thing. Hum the Japs. Hum the Japs. Voices rang out one after another, and the crew stood on the deck cheering loudly, waving their hats and waving their hands. The picture in Sugu's eyes began to change again. The sound of the propeller rang in Sugu's ears. Da-da-da-da. Sugu saw a crew member standing on the deck waving a flag, and plane slowly took off on the flight deck. Only then did he realize that he was on an aircraft carrier. Your Uncle Sachi's plane is about to take off. We want to gain air superiority. The scene in front of me changed to the perspective of an airplane again. It hit, it was the Soryo aircraft carrier. We hit the Soryo aircraft carrier. The images in front of Sugu were swaying back and forth. It was like the worst movie scene, and it was uncomfortable to change the perspective. It was suddenly from the perspective of a fighter jet, with the vast sky there, and suddenly it was switched to the perspective of a battleship, with countless crew members. Running on the deck, Sugu saw the battleship breaking through the waves and moving forward, while countless planes were circling overhead. Pay attention to the air defense and shoot them all down. Then a mess of pictures began to appear. After all, this was just the messy history and memories preserved in the steel. It was impossible to watch the scene smoothly. Then the deck began to shake again, and an explosive fell on the deck. An anxious voice sounded, "No, the bomb penetrated the flight deck of the ship island and exploded in the smoke exhaust belt under the second deck. Damage control should act quickly. Now that 3 boilers are back in operation, we will definitely be able to get the ship back to Bremerton. It's 15 knots, and we can maintain a speed of 15 knots." The deck was shaking, people were running, and then there was another explosion. Soon after, Sugu heard another shout. No, 2 torpedoes were hit on the port side, and our speed was reduced. Where's the damage control? Put out the fire quickly. No, I can't hold on anymore. Abandon ship, sir, declare to abandon ship. How can that be done? How can that be done? We can still save him. What do you know, abandon ship, prepare to abandon ship. Then a somewhat astonished voice appeared, how can this work? How can you give up so easily? 2 crewmen ran across the deck. You actually gave up like this? That's not possible. His palm touched the cold metal hatch. However, an order is an order after all. The chief has given the order to abandon ship. As ordinary crew members, they had no choice but to prepare to leave. The crew took one last look at the sinking warship and then boarded the lifeboat. My battleship, my girl must be handsome and brave and fearless. She will never give up. She has short blonde hair, she has long legs, she is the most wonderful girl. Sorry, we have to leave, but we will definitely win the final victory. These were the last words Sugu heard, and then the fragmented illusions and intermittent sounds disappeared little by little. Soon after, he was gasping for air with his palms covered on the rusty steel. The thrilling pictures flashed through his mind frame by frame, and the heart-rending sound kept repeating in his ears. He thought to himself that this was probably the composition of the so-called ship girl, which was composed of countless sailors' longings and unyielding memories. These memories eventually became ship girls, and the image of ship girls was the imagination and longing of these crew members for their own warships. The girl with short blonde hair is still an aircraft carrier. This is probably my ship girl. What kind of battleship should this be? He doesn't know much about battleships, and he doesn't seem to have a ship girl with short blonde hair. The next moment he thought about what kind of ship girl that should be, but at this time a voice sounded next to him. Who are you? Sugu immediately looked up and saw a girl with short blonde hair standing in front of him. She had short blonde hair that reached her ears, blue pupils and pretty cheeks, and her chest gave people a majestic feeling. Her dress was very short, exposing the girl's flat belly and navel, and the skirt was also very short. Under the skirt were knee-length stockings and shoes. At this time, she was standing very tall. She was standing on the scrap steel. Her skirt was also very short and her legs were spread apart. At this time, Sugu raised his head and looked up. The girl was standing in front of him. He raised his head and saw the infinite scenery under the skirt, which was blue and white striped underwear. The girl exclaimed, covering her skirt with both hands, and then quickly jumped down from the tall abandoned steel. Then she thought of something and raised her thigh, which was slender and tight. Then Sugu only saw a sharp whip thrown towards him. "What are you looking at, you pervert? I'm going to kick you to death." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 66. The sun shines through the skylight on the ordinary steel inside the warehouse. The bent propellers and dented wings of the plane on the ruins hit the ground with the girl's movements. The originally tidy warehouse turned into a riot. On sight. The feeling of the sharp whip legs hitting his face with the whistling wind was really uncomfortable. At this time, Sugu was rubbing his face and wiping off the shoe prints on his face. The first time I was beaten by a woman, I didn't expect it to be like this. Although I saw a beautiful scenery, I didn't want to be beaten like this. At this time, the girl with short blonde hair next to him looked at him with lowered eyebrows, wanting to reach out to help, but she hesitated a little. At this time, her face was more uneasy. "Admiral, I'm sorry, I didn't expect it to be you." The ship girl knew a lot of things from the time they were awakened. They were not ignorant children. The relationship between the Admiral and the ship girl was known from the time she was awakened. York City looked at the man rubbing his face, thinking that that was the person he would rely on for the rest of his life and battles. However, I kicked the other person as soon as they met. Although it didn't cause much harm, my Admiral should be very proud of himself as a man. I won't be stuck in the shoes for the rest of my life. However, she would definitely resist if she was kept in small shoes. But if she resisted the Admiral, she would be retaliated against. She might degenerate into a deep-sea ship girl. Thinking of this, she didn't know what to do. Sugu didn't know that York City thought so much. If he knew, he would probably recall the stream of consciousness novel called Spots on the Wall that he learned in high school. Divergent thinking is really amazing. At this time, he waved his hand to indicate that he was fine, but he was still rude and said, "You are dressed like that and standing so tall." "I just took a look." "Girls are not allowed to look there." Sugu said, "You stand so high, so you can naturally see it." York City rubbed his knuckles and asked, "I don't want to either." "And you can see it if you stand high." Sugu put his head aside, thinking that of course he could see it if he stood high. But seeing that the other party was about to get angry, Sugu avoided the other party's big eyes. The power brought by his slender thighs still made his face hurt. He quickly changed the subject and said, "Well, my head still hurts a little." Suddenly, York City immediately lost its intention to pursue the matter, and began to apologize for a while. Sugu waved his hand generously and said, "It's okay, forget it. Speaking of which, you are from York City." He looked at the girl in front of him. He had inferred it from the picture he saw when he touched the steel. Moreover, the girl in front of him was unexpectedly similar to the vertical painting in the game that he had seen. Recalling the original game, if the same artist was the same artist, just changing the hairstyle and clothes would make him look like a different person. Lexington couldn't recognize her because her hairstyle and clothes had changed, but the girl in front of her was dressed exactly the same as the one in the game. Speaking of York City, I didn't participate in the event where I could get York City, so there was no York City. Later I heard that it was open for construction, but I had already uninstalled the game. At this time, the city of York was built, which was really lucky. Sure enough, he was a European. Originally, he just wanted to experience what it was like to build. He didn't pay attention to any ship girls who appeared, and he didn't expect that they would leave York City. It stands to reason that York City needs a lot of resources. This college is so generous. In other words, unlike the game, there is no such thing as a construction formula here. What is built depends entirely on luck. On the other side, York City heard her admiral's words. She was a little confused and asked, "How do you know I am York City? My ship uniform has not been unfolded yet." Although there is no sense of substitution in appearance, Sugu is definitely from York City, with the same hairstyle and the same clothes. But of course Sugu would not talk about the past. He explained, "I have seen the history you have experienced, and I know the history of the old world pretty well. Besides, you didn't yell when you kicked me, 'I will Yumao kick you to death?' He who claims to be Yumao must be from York City. After all, I, Su, am also very powerful and can deduce the overall situation from the details." Hearing his admiral mention that incident again, York City complained, "Admiral, how come you still remember those things?" "I must remember what happened just now," Sugu sighed. Soon after they walked out of the warehouse, all the students who were here had disappeared. Only Zeppelin was still standing there. "You came out really late. You seem to be lucky. What kind of ship girl are you?" Sugu replied, "York City, make an appointment with someone." "You're lucky, I thought it was a light aircraft carrier," Zeppelin pouted. "Taking you to a place with the most aluminum seems to be of some use. Senior Akagi's request has finally been fulfilled. As long as it is an aircraft carrier, easy to handle." "Where are their people?" Sugu looked around and asked. They were referring to the students who were here. "Let's go, because there will be no classes next, and I want to cultivate a relationship with my ship girl for a while." Zeppelin made a rare joke, "The Europeans are still building, and the Africans have already finished lunch." After chatting casually for a while, Zeppelin showed little interest in Sugu. She waved her hand and said, "You can go, but you will report to the academy that specializes in aircraft carrier training during class tomorrow. Our instructors are here to teach you. The Akagi is very powerful. So I would like to remind you not to neglect her. You must listen to her. No matter what the request is, don't think about why. She has her own considerations in this way." Zeppelin was a little crazy. Why did his senior Akagi have to say this himself, after he had told him so many times? Asking your students to listen to you, is this what an instructor should say? It was obviously not like this before. Not long after, on the way out of the academy, Sugu noticed that York City had unfolded her ship uniform and was holding her flight deck in her hands. Her arms were swinging around as if trying to find a handsome posture. "Why is your ship suit always open?" Sugu remembered that Lexington never opened the ship suit in daily life, because opening the ship suit requires resources at any time. York City was a little confused about his admiral's question, but it's weird to always put away the ship's attire. A ship girl will become weak and weak if she puts away her ship's attire, just like you. It's not that we are weak, it's that you are extraordinary. Forget it, I won't tell you. I mean, if you don't put it away, it will continue to consume fuel. I don't have that much fuel for you." York City said hurriedly, "You are my admiral. You have to give me my daily ration. You can't deduct it. You can't start wearing small shoes so quickly. It's just a kick. As a man, it is necessary so stingy. I really want to kick it again. I'm a newcomer, I don't have that much fuel for you." In Sugu's view, York City obviously doesn't know everything, a girl with big breasts and no brains. If Lexington is already at level 100, York City in front of us is at level 1. York City opened his eyes wide with an expression of distrust and said, "Really? Do you know why there are no ship girls doing physical work? They are so powerful and can push heavy things with just a wave of their hands. Why don't they go? That's because having inhuman strength also requires inhuman consumption, so no one would let a ship girl do physical work, because the gain outweighs the loss. Replenishing the fuel you lose will cost a lot more resources than finding ordinary people to work. We kept talking like this until we walked out of the college. Sugu said, "I'll buy you some bedding later. You'll have to live in my place for now. Do you have any objection? I will prepare a large room in the future, but not now. Let me tell you first, even if I am your ship girl, if you want to do anything to me, I will still kick you. I'm not interested in you." "No interest, who are you kidding?" York City thought about this for a moment, then she saw her admiral walking away, and she quickly chased after him. "But, Admiral, I don't actually need to rest, let me fight, I still have a lot to do, I want to defeat those deep-sea ship girl." He is such a passionate kid, but why is he so idealistic? Sugu sighed and said, "I know that as long as the ship is here, you will be energetic and don't need to sleep or rest, but you really can't keep driving." "Who told you that?" "Such a strange statement." "I am the Yorktown, a powerful aircraft carrier. It's okay if I say it, you, the new admiral. Of course, as for resources, Admiral, you must provide them to me." After walking like this, they soon arrived at the residence. Sugu opened the door and said to York City, "It was her who told me, Lexington." York City immediately saw Lexington sitting on the sofa. Lexington said that was her senior. At this time, the woman sitting elegantly in front of her just glanced at her, and she realized that the other person's sharp eyes were staring at her like a wild beast, and she was about to become prey. Strong, very strong, very strong, that was the only feeling she had at this time. York City's feet rubbed the ground uneasily, and his hands unintentionally pulled his short skirt. His jumpy expression calmed down, and he hesitated to speak. "Well, what you said, Admiral, I thought about it, and it sounds like it doesn't make any sense." "It makes sense." Then she immediately screamed, "Ah, why is Senior Lexington here with you?" "Looking for the lost ship girl." Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 67. Lexington is a perfect wife. When it comes to combat and command, her excellent speed allows her to ensure the superiority of the fleet to the greatest extent. Her excellent command skills allow her to greatly improve her carrier-based aircraft, and she even has excellent temperament, and command skills can also make teammates around you feel at ease and allow everyone's carrier-based aircraft to perform exceptionally. And when it comes to home, she can handle it perfectly no matter what it is. For example, starting from little Turpit's milk bread to her sister's egg sandwich, there is nothing she is not good at. She can sweep the cobwebs from the ceiling while wearing a headscarf, she can kill cockroaches with her slippers, she even bargains when going shopping, and of course she is good at keeping accounts. There are countless things she is good at. The only thing she is not good at is not knowing how to deepen the relationship with her admiral. And if there is anything that can make Lexington angry, it is that there is a strange woman next to his admiral and husband. Although she could guess that it was her admiral's new ship girl, and she could also see that the woman with short blonde hair was following her admiral with a reluctant expression, it did not prevent her from looking at her like a mistress. The reputation of the Hood was the third and fourth, and Bismarck and Tirpitz were the fifth and sixth. This was already an established fact and there was no way to change it. Although Akage was watching with eager eyes, he was mentally prepared, but at this time, another person suddenly came. It has to be feared. Sugu looked at Lexington's puzzled expression and explained, York City, the ship girl I built." On the other side, York City lowered her head and looked downcast. To be honest, she was frightened at first. The people in the room gave her the feeling that they were not ordinary people. If little Tirpitz only grew up in exercises, Lexington and Saratoga grew up in countless battles with the deep-sea ship girls, and the momentum that suddenly burst out was unexpectedly powerful. York City, let me introduce it to you too. This is Lexington, Saratoga, and this is Little Tirpitz. York City was obviously intimidated by the momentum Lexington began to exude. She said honestly all the way, Senior Lexington, Senior Saratoga. He seemed to be an honest kid, there was no need to make a fuss, and he might be able to help. Lexington smiled and said, hello. Saratoga looked at York City in front of her. It felt really good to be called senior in a respectful tone. She suddenly felt that it was great that her brother-in-law built a ship girl, and the most important thing was the other person is more mature than me in body and appearance but still calls me senior. Sugu untied his coat and hung it on the hanger. He said, York City, you can sleep with Lexington and the others tonight, because there is no other way. There is no bed at home, and it is even more inappropriate for you and me to sleep. Let Xiazai sleep with me. You three will make do for the night. York City didn't listen to him at all, so he could only hand over this big-chested, brainless York City to Lexington. Besides, Lexington, you also teach her something. She doesn't believe what I say. He can trust Lexington, a 100-level aircraft carrier. York City looked at the few ship girls in front of her. She couldn't figure out where her admiral got so many ship girls. The sharpness and handsomeness when he kicked out that kick completely disappeared. At this time, York City looked like an aggrieved little kid. Daughter-in-law. It's too difficult to handle. Thinking about it, she was a little afraid of sleeping with Lexington at night. Although Lexington Senpai's smile is reassuring now, the impression he gave at first was too deep, and he must be a very scary senior. At night, York City slept stiffly next to Lexington. Lexington said under the faint moonlight, hello, you are York City, and I am Lexington. From every perspective, I am your senior. York City nodded, yes, yes. It's so nice to meet you. Really, York City's stiff body softened. To be honest, no one could resist such a gentle greeting from Lexington. I want to talk to you, I won't refuse. Certainly. The fierce aura she felt at first made her think that he was a difficult person. At this time, she looked at Lexington's hazy silhouette in the dark and listened to Lexington talking to her. Her original impression was, little by little changes. At first she moved it like a dice, answering Lexington's words, and slowly she spoke more and more. A little bit from fighting to life, and then starting to talk about everyone's admiral. Sometimes the admiral will tell me about the past. He has a pair of very good parents. Although they are not rich people, they are hard-working people who take good care of their families. My mother is a bit shrewd, but she manages everything. He was well organized. His father sometimes had a bad temper, but he worked very hard and never went out to eat and drink like his colleagues. All the money would be brought home. He also has an older brother who said that his elder brother is much better than him. He went to the best university in the local province. He is very good at taking care of others, but his temper is a little bit stubborn. And he is the admiral. As the younger brother, he always has to respond to his elder brother. Many times, although I didn't say anything, but I knew he was probably a little homesick. I asked him why he didn't go back for a visit. He said that he probably would never go back. Later, I never asked him about his past. I heard him singing alone. He would never sing to us like that, nor would he sing in a place with people. I heard him accidentally because he felt sad. It's probably a song I listened to when I was a kid. The song was very good. I saw him crying while singing. Lexington sang softly the song he accidentally heard from his admiral. At this time, York City was listening to Lexington keep talking about her admiral in the darkness. An increasingly plump admiral appeared in front of her. Of course, a super plump senior Lexington had already taken shape. Lexington recalled what happened when they met again. Nothing romantic had happened since they got along, and most of the time they just went on in a normal way. And my own admiral is not a tall, handsome, or knowledgeable person. He doesn't understand many things in this world. He sometimes says strange things and is childish. But do couples really need a lot of passion? No matter how much passion and romance there is, it will eventually turn into peace. Lexington pursed his lips and thought about something, and then said, "Actually, we also had a garrison before. The former garrison was very powerful, but it declined after the disappearance of the admiral. If you want to talk about him in the past, he was very powerful. What does it feel like? A pervert, self-righteous, African, doing nothing all day, and not knowing what he was doing all day long. I have very few memories of that period. Later I met him again. He looked at us with strange eyes, and I don't know why, but he said he suffered some head injuries so he can't remember many things. But even if he can't remember me, I still remember him. When we meet and get to know each other again, the admiral gives people a completely different feeling. Although it's different, but his personality is much better. Although he looks very powerful, I always thought he was a shy kid." As he spoke, Lexington turned around and lay on the pillow, saying, "Speaking of which, was your sister still in the townhouse before?" York City was a little confused, and she asked, "My sister?" "Yeah, shouldn't Bumblebee be your sister?" "Oh, Hornet, it's the third ship of the York City class, but to say sister, she has to recognize me as her sister." York City looked up at the ceiling. "If we want ships of the same type, we can say we are sisters. If so, how many sisters would there be? Only when they recognize each other can they be called sisters." But she didn't think too much about it, she just asked curiously, "Speaking of which, does she also like the admiral?" "She doesn't like the admiral. She probably hates the admiral. But the admiral likes her, but he just likes her equipment." After arriving at the garrison, her carrier-based aircraft bomber B-25 was taken away by the admiral, but what about her? I dare not say that she is just a sulking child. Senior, you have said so much. If you think about it this way, the admiral is actually terrible, isn't he? But you like him. Lexington said slowly, "What can I do? Although it's terrible, I'm already in love." The surrounding atmosphere suddenly changed. After a long time, York City didn't want the atmosphere to become oppressive. She said, "Senior, do you want to go to the academy to study with us tomorrow?" Lexington thought for a while and said, "I don't need to study any more to say something immodest. I know everything I need to know. I don't plan to be a scientist, so I will just be an ordinary ship girl. My wife is well, so no one can teach me. And what you don't know is that in addition to a few of us, the admiral also has a few destroyers. They will come here to learn during the day, and I will teach them." York City glanced at Saratoga, who was sleeping soundly next to him, and said, "What about Saratoga?" "Gaga, no need. Don't look at her like this. In fact, she is very strong, even stronger than me. And including the child you saw at the beginning, we call her Xiaozai, but she is actually the Tirpitz. Although he has no actual combat experience, he has experienced many exercises. Then can I also learn from the seniors?" York City still knew how much she weighed. After all, the momentum she felt at the beginning impressed her deeply. "Okay, it's okay. I like York City very much. No matter what problems York City has, just come and ask sister. Please ask senior. No matter what problems you encounter, just rely on sister." York City snickered like a little hen, "Such a senior is great," and then she said, "Okay, in the afternoon I heard that our instructor at the school is Akage. I thought he was very powerful, but now I think about it, it's definitely not as powerful as the seniors." Lexington immediately thought of what Akage did in the interview. How dare this guy do something? She said, "She should be very powerful. It would be great if you studied with her. But if you can, what happened to you in the academy, you must tell me everything. Why? As the admiral's wife, I always want to know about the admiral's activities, including his diet, life, and studies. But he is a very sensitive person. You must not let him know what I told you. Yes, York City nodded heavily. She felt that she had been impressed by her senior. He was obviously such a friendly senior. Why did she think so in the first place? I thought he was a very vicious person, but it's great to have such a senior. Although the admiral is still a scumbag admiral, the senior is the best senior. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 68. The aircraft carrier branch that Sugu was going to was to the north of the college, and the one who came with him today was York City. At this time, there were many people gathered in the branch to attend the lecture. There were people walking in twos and threes along the road. Among them were newcomers like himself, as well as formal admirals wearing formal military uniforms. He even saw Gold Star General level medals hanging on their shoulders. Admiral. Passing by the glass window of the teaching building, he approached, adjusted his hat to find a suitable position, and adjusted his collar and tie. There were notice boards, flower beds, and plane trees along the way. They passed by a lake. Sugu saw the roses climbing all over the wall of the branch. At this time, a hand suddenly patted his shoulder. Why are you here? Isn't your little Tirpitz a battleship? You should be taking lessons from Instructor Nelson. Sugu turned his head and realized that it was the Admiral Lu Jianshu whom he knew. The latter was neatly and meticulously dressed in military uniform. My little house doesn't need to learn combat knowledge anymore. This time I'm joined by another ship girl. Lu Jianshu looked around and asked, which one? Look at the scenery over there, my new ship girl, the Yorktown. Lu Jianshu immediately saw the girl with short blonde hair standing in the distance, and thought to himself that the seniors were indeed right, there were countless Europeans to kill. But he didn't care. Although the Yorktown was very good, it was not very strong among aircraft carriers. You come here, who is your instructor? Akagi. We have several instructors here, and Akagi is the strongest. A newcomer like you doesn't need Akagi to teach you at all, but the 100-eyed giant instructor is better. Who told you to come here? Zeppelin. The two were walking side by side. Lu Jianshu said, it's really strange, but maybe she is considering that your ship girl York City is an aircraft carrier. If you simply let Akagi teach, after all, the 100-eyed giant instructor is just a light mother. But since your instructor if it's Akagi, then you'll make a fortune. How to say? Lu Jianshu has a cheerful personality. He said, Akagi has only been here for a short time, but within a short time of coming here, she has become the instructor of all light carriers, aircraft carriers, and aircraft carriers in the teaching academy. But she has never had any achievements in the past, and generally speaking, those powerful ship girls will always have achievements spread. Ordinary people may not know those achievements, but the admiral must know. However, she seemed to appear suddenly. The ship girl, like a newcomer, no admiral or ship girl knew her. As soon as she came to the academy she became the instructor of all light carriers, aircraft carriers, and aircraft carriers. She did more than teach the new admirals. It is to teach those already famous admirals and famous and powerful ship girls who occasionally return to the academy to study. Of course some people were dissatisfied with her at first. So what should I do if they are dissatisfied? It's very simple. It's enough for everyone to act together. It couldn't be a simpler way to deal with it. The one who challenged her that time was the aircraft carrier Fi Long. That ship girl had countless experiences in the past. She suppressed the deep sea for the first time, and even participated in the battle to suppress the deep sea flagship. Although Akagi was the predecessor of the Flying Dragon in the history of the Old World, ship girls are not limited to historical achievements. Many people watched the exercise at that time. I thought it was a very exciting battle. However, the final battle was beyond everyone's expectations. The battle was not exciting at all. Instead, it was terrifyingly simple. What does it look like for adults to bully children? You know what? That's what it's like. Akagi controlled the overwhelming carrier-based aircraft and shot down 7 or 8 of the Hero's carrier-based aircraft in a single air battle, completely controlling the air. Completely controlling the air, that's not that easy. It's not real. In a battleship, each aircraft has a pilot. Each ship girl needs to be distracted to control each carrier-based aircraft, allowing so many carrier-based aircraft to attack so many carrier-based aircraft at the same time and coordinate with each other to shuttle. Raising the altitude or diving takes a lot of energy. Just her ability to control carrier-based aircraft with one hand can be said to be a powerful ship girl. Controlling the overwhelming carrier-based aircraft is not a simple matter. There are so many carrier-based aircraft that I don't know how many battles and drills it takes to train her. But she is not only in combat, she is familiar with quite a few ship girls, and she seems to have lived with many of them for a long time. She knows the fighting techniques and styles of the deep-sea flagship very well, and that is the deep-sea flagship. She has actually fought against them and survived. Especially her equipment, which is not ordinary ship equipment. The General Akagi is basically equipped with fighter jets 0 Fighter 21, Type 99 Ship Storm and Type 97 Ship Attack. You should know that the ship equipment is all there are parameters, such as 0 Battle 21, Type 99 Ship Attack, and Type 97 Ship Attack. Many people think that they are all whiteboard green equipment. And what about our Akagi instructor? The equipment she owns is the purple bomber BTD-1 Destruction. She also has the golden fighter jet Sea-Fang, which is a first-class bomber and fighter jet. No one knows where she got the equipment, but she just has it. It's like no one can investigate her past experience. After that battle, no one dared to look down upon her anymore. Even those admirals and shipwives who had made great achievements in battle became honest. From then on, everyone maintained respect for her. No one has seen her admiral, and she has never mentioned her past. Many people want to pick her up, but no one has done it. Especially her character, she treats everyone equally. You can ask her questions, and she will tell you everything, but if you want to take a step closer, you may only get a smiling rejection. If you still don't give up, that. What about that? Sugu was a little curious. Is it true that someone can beat someone if they don't give up on Shikong? If someone keeps harassing Akagi, you should have seen Instructor Zeppelin in the academy. Instructor Zeppelin will beat that person up. That Zeppelin, Sugu thought of her fiery personality, she would definitely be capable of beating people. Although, there are also rumors in the academy that Akagi is actually overstretched. If you meet her, you must take care of your aluminum. If you are a little careless, you will not unknowingly have all your aluminum stolen by Instructor Akagi. Kill all the materials. It's a joke. If Instructor Akagi wants it, I don't know how many people will donate their aluminum materials. Of course, I don't believe that such a perfect goddess would do such a thing. Sugu teased, it sounds like you must like her. Of course, who doesn't like it? Lu Jianshu is not an old man yet, so he can't tell every beautiful ship girl that she is my wife. But although she is gentle and elegant, she seems to be approachable. In fact, no one can get close to her. She will not agree to others' invitations to eat, and if you give her a gift, she will return it to you. That's why if you don't believe it, some people say that she is overstretched. And she always lives in seclusion, just like many dignified ladies described in the old world. Look at the people around you who come with destroyers. Logically, they don't come here to study courses, but they all come. Why? Because Akagi is a very popular goddess in the academy. Sugu looked around, and it seemed that there was really a destroyer coming with a little girl. However, Akagi was busy eating and drinking, and Sugu himself could be said to be an old salted fish. It was hard for him to regard Akagi as some kind of goddess, and besides, he had a perfect wife, Lexington. He walked up the steps of the branch onto the large playground, and then he saw a black-haired woman wearing a wide-sleeved kimono with cherry blossoms embroidered on the sleeves standing on it. At this time, the sea breeze blew over, and the wide sleeves and hair were swaying in the wind. Akagi raised a hand to smooth the long hair beside her ears and tucked the hair behind her ears, looking like a goddess. On the other side, Lu Jianxu noticed Sugu's eyes and said, "Don't have any other ideas. Although she smiles at you, she actually means nothing else." Sugu looked at Akagi, who was wearing clogs, and remembered that Lexington said that she met Akagi, who used to guard the mansion at the academy. So could it be this? But he wasn't going to take the initiative to ask because he hated embarrassment so much. He stood on the steps and turned around and shouted, York City, walk faster, it's really a grind." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 69. Akagi's class was on a large playground. At this time, she held a bow in her right hand and raised it high to the sky. Holding the bow in the right hand is a somewhat awkward posture. The reason for this is probably that the bridge of the historical Akagi aircraft carrier was originally on the left side. However, throughout the history of aircraft carriers, from scratch to the present, aircraft carriers of various countries still follow the inherent design concept is to build the aircraft carrier bridge on the right side of the ship, which is more suitable for pilots to operate aircraft for takeoff and landing. Among so many aircraft carriers, only the bridges of the Akagi and Hiryu are on the left. So Akagi is left-handed, holding the bow in his right hand and pulling the string in his left hand. The sea breeze gradually began to blow on the playground. At this time, Akagi pulled out an arrow from the quiver. The tail of the arrow was not painted with the symbol of the 99 type ship explosion like the vertical painting that Sugu originally knew. At this time, the tail fin is another logo, but he can't see it clearly from far away. Immediately afterwards, as Akagi let go of his hand, the arrow flew into the sky and turned into an airplane little by little. It was a carrier-based aircraft belonging to a ship girl. The carrier-based aircraft is not big and cannot fly to an altitude of several thousand meters like a real aircraft. At this time, the carrier-based aircraft is just circling the entire playground at low altitude. Sugu looked at the situation in front of him that violated the common sense he knew, and said softly, "It's so magical." Lu Jianxu stood next to him and said, "The ship girls are originally fantasy-like beings, and their weapons are also like that, fantasy-like weapons." As expected, one cannot use common sense to examine the world, so Sugu saw York City beside him with wide eyes and longing, who was staring at the sky intently. "York City, how did your carrier-based aircraft appear?" "Of course it took off from the flight deck." "Haven't you seen my ship uniform?" Sugu sighed and said, "It's not magical at all." York City watched the plane hovering in the sky perform all kinds of extremely difficult movements. She said angrily to her Admiral's Sai, "You are very annoying." She did not have the patience to pamper her like Lexington. "Admiral, don't talk, just listen and ask questions." At this time, Akagi was operating his carrier-based aircraft on the playground while constantly talking about things that need to be paid attention to as a light carrier, aircraft carrier, and equipment carrier, such as how to control more aircraft more accurately. Akagi waved her hand, and the carrier-based aircraft immediately formed a formation and flew across the sky neatly. She said, "As a ship girl who mainly relies on carrier-based aircraft for combat, the first thing you should understand is air defense. Only if you understand air defense can you learn how to defend yourself. Common. There are several kinds of anti-aircraft guns, and there are also several ways to avoid them. Fighters must learn when to dive, and how to raise the fighter and climb to a higher altitude when necessary. If the enemy also has carrier-based aircraft, the first thing to do is to ensure air supremacy. Only when air supremacy is ensured can it be ensured. Carrier-based aircraft inflict damage to the enemy. Akagi's carrier-based aircraft took off from the big playground and flew into the distance like a dragonfly, making ripples across the lake. She said, "There are a few things you need to pay attention to when dropping bombs. Dive bombing should also pay attention to the following points in this situation, namely, Akagi's courses are explained in detail, but many things cannot be understood by just talking. Akagi has repeatedly emphasized that one should improve one's control level through constant battles and exercises." At this time, York City, who was surrounded by the crowd, was listening with great interest, but Sugu himself was listening in a daze. It was almost noon when the class ended. Just as Sugu was about to leave, because he had always felt the need to discuss the matter with Lexington about Akagi, but at this time a voice sounded behind him. "Are you a newcomer? Do you want to join the Kyoto Club?" Akagi in front of him looked like he didn't recognize him at all, which was very difficult to deal with, but Sugu shook his head about joining the Kyoto Club. "Even if you don't want to join the Kyoto Club, at least come and take a look." Without waiting for Sugu to agree, Sheikh Hung Shiren left. Sugu looked around and didn't know what to do. At this time, Lu Jianshu tugged on his clothes and said, "Instructor Sheikh Hung actually invited you to join the archery club. If you don't agree, be careful of Instructor Shishin's escort team." Sugu followed Lu Jianshu on the way to the archery department. He looked around along the way and saw that there were many people traveling with him. Soon after, he walked down from the big playground, passed through several alleys that seemed to be shortcuts, and walked along the Japanese-style eaves. Finally, following the example of others, he took off his shoes and stood on the wooden floor of the Kyoto department. Someone handed him a set of protective gear, thanked him for putting it on, and then he stood in the activity room playing with the wooden bow in his hand. Next to him, York City was looking around, curious about everything. Advisor Su said, "You don't want it?" York City said noncommittally, "What am I practicing for?" "Yes, what are you doing here in York City? Then what do you do if you practice by yourself?" Thinking of this, he suddenly lost interest. He was only interested in bows and arrows when he was a child. Now he prefers crossbows to bows, so he stood in the activity room and pulled the bow string at will. The bow was injured in the air. A voice sounded beside him. Sugu turned his head and saw Akagi standing next to him. So he quickly explained, "I don't know very well." He did know that Sara injured the bow, but he had never played with a bow and didn't pay attention. Akagi didn't pay attention to her and said to herself, "Kyoto archery is a national form of sports in the past, with rich philosophical connotations. It not only requires the archer to have superb archery skills, but also requires the archer to complete the task under the guidance of Tao. The highly harmonious unity of the body, mind, and bow and arrow expresses the pursuit of noble moral character, the yearning and enjoyment of the beauty of strength and accuracy, and ultimately melts into the pursuit and worship of truth. Kyoto emphasizes high-intensity basic skills practice. The most important thing is the training method is to practice a certain basic action thousands of times until the moment is accurate. Before holding the bow, the shooter is required to face the target, stand upright, and concentrate to achieve a state of calmness. It is required that before shooting, try to eliminate distracting thoughts in your mind, and seriously think about and clarify the purpose and significance of archery. After completing the above-mentioned mental adjustment stage, the shooter's demeanor will be naturally calm, the movements will be steady and the rhythm will be clear, and then he can start shooting. After saying this, Akagi asked, "Can you use a bow? Give it a try." Sugu held the bow in his left hand and took out arrows from the quiver with his right hand and put them on the bow. Raise your arms higher. With that said, Akage walked closer to Sugu and held his hand with one hand. Hold it like this. Now hold the tail fin with your left hand and place it on the bowstring. Don't you have a ring on? Your fingers will be very painful. Sugu felt Chikung standing behind him and clinging to him, feeling her white and slender fingers touch his own, and the warm touch came to him. Now raise the bow. If you are a beginner, you can squint one eye and aim at the target. Sugu tried hard to raise the bow, but he only felt distraught because Akage stood behind him and pressed against him, his palm touching his own to demonstrate. No, Akage, beauty, your breasts are pressed against each other. No, your back is already pressed together, very tight. Thinking about it this way, it's really hard to be distracted when a beautiful woman is close to you. After finally aiming at the target, Sugu let go of the bowstring and the arrow flew out quickly. However, as the arrow flew out, there was nothing on the target platform in front of him. The arrow had already flown to nowhere. As Akage left him, Sugu let out a long sigh of relief. Then he saw York City staring at him with a smile on his face, and immediately glared at him. A young admiral in the crowd stood up, but he obviously didn't look like a newcomer. He said, "Instructor Akage, is this how you hold the bow?" Even a layman could tell that something was wrong with the way he held the bow. After Akage walked away from Sugu, she stood in front of a table and played with her own bow. She heard one of her students calling her. She took a look and said, "Yes, you are the one who holds the bow like that, done right." The admiral sighed and said, "Won't Instructor Akage teach me step by step?" Akage smiled gently and said, "You are not a newcomer anymore." Sugu smiled and put on the ring again and stood by the wall of the archery department, stroking the string of the wooden bow. The bowstring could not be seen to be made of any material, but it was probably animal tendon. As he thought about this, a black light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. Do. An arrow was nailed to the wall of the activity room next to his face and then fell to the ground. It turned out that the arrow had been detached. Sugu looked in the direction of the arrow and Lu Jianxia put it down in the distance. Bao looked at him deeply. On the other side, Lu Jianxia resolutely walked out of the door of the archery department. He looked up at the blue sky, thinking about the friend he had known for many days. "If you are short of money, you can ask me to borrow it. If you have any knowledge that you don't understand, I will tell you. If someone bullies you, you can also ask me. But now that you have such close contact with Instructor Akage, I'm sorry, brother. I don't have you as a friend." Sugu followed and looked around. There were quite a few people looking at him eagerly, but they didn't do anything extra. Not long after, someone left. Sugu had already wanted to leave, but he was called here, so naturally he didn't want to leave on his own like the others, because it was too rude. After all, he had to hit at least one person before leaving. Call. Akage wiped her longbow with a cloth. The people in the archery department had left. Then she looked at Sugu, who was observing the surroundings, and said, "You are not good at this." Sugu placed his bow in a fixed place like others. He took off the breast protector on his chest and said, "Yes. Speaking of which, you are a newcomer. Do you know that apart from the power brought by the ship uniform, ship girls are actually the same as ordinary people in many places? Do you know how to wake up your ship girls after they fall into the water? If an ordinary person falls into the water, I still know, but it is just artificial respiration. But what about the ship girl? How to wake up a ship girl who fell into the water? To be honest, I really don't know." So Sugu shook his head. Akage smiled and said, "Then I will give you a demonstration. You come here and walk here. Way on the ground?" Artificial respiration, Sugu wanted to refuse, but he had always developed the habit of never contradicting his leader unless it was something very important. "No. Yeah, that's good, I don't know anything else." Sugu lay on the floor, but it only lasted a second before he sat up again. Lying on the floor in front of outsiders was really uncomfortable. He sat on the floor and motioned for York City to come over, but York City Kenai shook his head like a rattle, and then he saw Akagi on the other side looking at him, and finally he was still lying on the floor. If you drown, you'll close your eyes. Okay, Sugu closed his eyes looking at the ceiling. At this time, Akagi knelt down demurely next to Sugu. Then she used her slender fingers to lift her long hair from her temples and tucked it behind her ears. Then she slowly lowered her head in the eyes of York City, who was desperately trying to learn skills. That familiar face is right in front of him. This is such a rare opportunity. Is this the only way to get close to the Admiral? But what he did seemed to be abnormal. Sure enough, he had to stop, but otherwise, he would never be able to defeat Lexington. Sugu was closing his eyes, thinking about when Shi Kong would press his chest, when he suddenly felt soft lips touching his own. He squinted his eyes and pursed his lips subconsciously, then quickly opened his eyes and saw Akagi's eyes as bright as stars. At the same time, Shi Kong noticed that Sugu opened his eyes and raised his body, and Sugu also quickly sat up from the floor. What? Are you not used to it? Do you want to continue? Akagi said. Her own face turned red first, and the pink color spread from her cheeks to her earlobes. At this time, she looked at Sugu looking at her with a puzzled look on her face. Her original courage was gone. She said, "It's better not to continue like this. I want to teach you. This is called cardiopulmonary resuscitation." Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, the name sounds fancy, but you can't lie to me, this is basically artificial respiration. And you didn't even press your chest, and you didn't breathe into my mouth at all, although your lips were so soft that I wanted to continue. Consultant Su said, "Have we known each other before? It always feels very familiar." Akagi smiled and replied, "What do you think?" "No." Akagi still smiled but did not answer. "I'll be sure to ask Lexington when I get back, she will definitely know what's going on." Thinking like this, Sugu adjusted his clothes and prepared to leave without saying anything. Akagi suddenly said, "Let's eat at my house." "No, no, no." Akagi showed a calm expression and said, "Do you think I am a nympho? Yes, everyone would reject a woman like me." Sugu finally couldn't resist Akagi's sad eyes. Sure enough, he was still not good at rejection from beautiful women, and this Akagi was too weird. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai-de Rong Yan. Chapter 70. Akagi's room has a typical Japanese style, without complicated furniture and decorations. The floor is covered with tatami mats, and the tatami mats are connected by white cloth strips. There is a coffee table in the center of the room, simple beige curtains are hung on the windows, and a decorative Japanese carp streamer hangs on the wall. The whole room gives people a sense of elegance and clear lines. As he walked into the room, Akagi said, "The room is very small, so I'll make do with it while I prepare lunch." "No, no, it's a beautiful room." After sitting in the living room for a while, Sugu soon saw Akagi bringing out plates of food from the kitchen. In just a moment, the table was filled with food, including tempura, udon, sushi, fried shrimp, curry, omelette rice, ham, vegetable salad, tenderloin, cola chicken wings, roast duck. "I don't know anyone, there is a table full of food." Akagi sat down at the dining table and said, "There are very few things, so I'll make do with them. They've been prepared a long time ago." Sugu looked at the dishes on the dining table. How could 3 people eat so much? Even if they were treating guests to a meal, they wouldn't need so many dishes at all. But what Sugu was more curious about than these was how he could cook so many dishes in such a short time. Akagi held his chopsticks and said, "Because I asked Zeppelin to prepare it in the morning." "What about Instructor Zeppelin?" She left. It can't be like this. Where is Instructor Zeppelin? Is it really okay not to invite her? Sugu couldn't help but want to complain in his heart. Seeing that all the dishes on the dinner table were served, Akage quickly greeted, "You're welcome, you're welcome." Akage said this, she was really not polite at all, and then she stretched out her chopsticks to pick up the dishes. After already eating, Akage said, "Then I'm going to start." Sugu didn't know much about Japanese table etiquette, but he knew that some families didn't speak at all before eating or sleeping, so he remained silent, but Akage spoke up and asked, "Have you been in Chuangzhou for a long time?" It didn't take long, maybe a week before the written test. What do you think of the history of the old world? After all, countries hated each other and battleships attacked each other. Sugu was familiar with the history of the old world. He said, "The past is the past." The warships at that time were just weapons and had no thoughts. No matter what sin, no ship was responsible for it. The murderers were people. Not a knife. While talking casually, Sugu slowly put down his chopsticks and looked around when he was almost done eating. York City, who was clumsily holding her chopsticks next to him, looked at her admiral and looked at her. She suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She had not picked up a dish for many times, so Sugu could only help her pick up the dish she had been thinking about. Dishes to eat. Then Sugu turned around and saw Akage. Akage's movements were agile, including fried shrimp, chicken wings, and sari. Although his movements were still elegant, he watched the food being put into Akage's mouth bit by bit, with such weight. Not something a woman can eat. I thought she was a very dignified woman at first, but she turned out to be really scary once she started eating. At this time, Akage suddenly discovered something. She took a sip of soup and raised her head to look at Sugu with some confusion, but she didn't care and continued to hold out her chopsticks. Akage's cheeks were squirming like a hamster, and before he could swallow the food in his mouth, he was already picking up the food with his chopsticks. At home, his parents repeatedly emphasized that this was an impolite way of eating, but when he saw this, Sugu only felt that he was a foodie because he was pretty. The girl is surprisingly cute. 1 piece of roast duck, 2 pieces of roast duck. 1 piece of sushi, 2 pieces of sushi, and then all sushi was gone. 1 bowl of curry bibimbap, 2 bowls of curry bibimbap. Now Akage seemed to be struggling, that expression of inability to let go appeared on her face, and finally she decided to leave the omelette rice to York City. She looked at the cooked chicken wings. She started to eat fried shrimp again. Sugu thought silently in his heart. On the other side, Akage held a piece of fried shrimp. She looked up and saw Sugu still staring at her, so she slowly put down her chopsticks and asked shyly, "You look at me like this, do you eat a lot?" "Nonsense, you have already eaten several bowls of rice, and you are going to keep eating with this attitude. Is Akage really overstuffed? There is no bottom line for the stomach, no one can afford it." But to a certain extent, Sugu was a very hypocritical person. He quickly replied, "No. Thanks." There is no need to thank him, Sugu thought, and then continued to look at the other person and continue eating with a happy face. I don't know why Sugu suddenly seemed to feed her. After a long time, when the dishes on the table became clean, Akage looked satisfied. She put her chopsticks in her hands and clasped her hands together, saying, "Thank you for the hospitality." Then she thought of something and blushed. The first time she met the admiral, she acted really ugly, but she really couldn't stand the temptation of food. Then seeing that there was no sound at the dinner table, Akage looked at York City. "You are York City, right? What if you and I were still enemies in those old histories? We even had a battle with your sister Enterprise." Yorktown responded, "Yeah, but that's just history." Akage looked at Sugu again and said, "Since York City was built, you should have experienced the past history." Speaking of which, you have always felt that you and I should have some close relationship. As he spoke like this, Sugu waited for the answer. Then he saw Akage stand up again and take out a plate from the kitchen and said, "Here, would you like some cakes?" "Yokan." Sugu rubbed his forehead and thought, "Girl, it's a bit too much for you to eat cakes just after dinner." York City also had a stomach that was different from ordinary people, and it was difficult to resist the kindness of her predecessors, so she stretched out her hand, picked up a piece of pastry, put it in her mouth, and said, "It's delicious." Chewing slowly, York City felt a little dazed. Instructor Akage was super strong and very edible. It was awesome. Then she reached out to get the pastries again, thinking, "No, where are you, Lexington-senpai? I'm about to be captured by Akage-senpai." After finishing the pastry, York City clapped his hands and wiped off the crumbs, and said, "Senior Akage must have been very powerful before? I don't know anything about the knowledge you started talking about, such as how to control a carrier-based aircraft, and you the carrier-based aircraft are so powerful. Well, the admiral before senior must have been very powerful." But just after finishing speaking, York City was stunned for a moment. She was not an idiot. She was able to go to the academy to be an instructor instead of in the garrison. She was probably a ship girl without an admiral, or maybe she was a ship girl whose admiral had an accident. Wasn't it a bad thing to ask like that? Then she wanted to change the subject, so she said, "Senior must have experienced many battles." Akage said gently, "I experienced many battles before I grew up little by little when I was in the garrison." "Where are my carrier-based aircraft?" "My admiral gave them to me. Although they look very powerful, they are actually just a set of the most basic equipment. There are many people in the garrison who are better than me and have better equipment than me. For example, I have never touched carrier-based aircraft such as the bomber B-25. Then the senior was awakened, or did he join the garrison after meeting his admiral by chance? Was he picked up? I didn't appear after defeating the deep-sea ship girl, so I wasn't fished out, nor was I awakened from the steel by my admiral. Destiny is so magical. In the past, my admiral would occasionally pick up some things on the sea surface, steel. Resources like aluminum are different every day, and I was picked up." York City didn't believe it. She said, "How could it be picked up?" The more Sugu listened next to him, the more he felt wrong. Why did this story give people a very familiar feeling? Then he saw Akage looking at him. He remembered that there were many ways to obtain ship girls in the game. In addition to the most common ones being construction and salvage, there were also ship girls rewarded in events. In addition, there were mission rewards, such as Fletcher and Zyouta. Erbits, the rarest way to obtain a ship girl is probably through the daily rewards. What about yourself? For now, I got Akage and Z24 from the daily rewards, but I have to say that every time I think about it, I still feel that I am lucky. How did you get your first Akage? That was found by opening a box very early in the game. Thinking of this, Sugu watched the smiling Akage narrowing his eyes at him. At this time, Akage was kneeling on the tatami, her hands placed squarely on her legs. Her original foodie look was not visible at all, only the image of a dignified lady could be seen. She looked at the astonished expression on Sugu's face, bowed and said softly, "Admiral, welcome back."